Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jagaballabha Girivardhari Gopi Jagaballabha Girivardhari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Amadava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ramo Hare Ramo Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramamsa Paramajikacharya Totada Sata Shri Śrīmad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki Granthad Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Ki Svāmī Bhaktivedanta Ki Gaur Premanand. All glories to Simalavanti. All glories to Simalavanti. All glories to Simalavanti. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. These little lav mics are unique and they always seem to be facing the wrong direction. So we're on Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 18, isn't that right? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Anmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Pada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Bitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhunam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavan Eshvari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, so 2.9.18. Tadarshana lada pari plutantaro. Tadarshana hlada pari plutantaro. Hrishyatanu prema bharashru lochanaha. Hrishyatanu prema bharashru lochanaha. Nanama padambujam asya vishvashrik. Nanama padambujam asya vishvashrik. Yad paramahamsyena patadigamyate. Yad paramahamsyena patadigamyate. Tadarshana hlada pariplutantaro. Hrishyatanu prema bharashru lochanaha. Nanama padam bujam asya vishvasrik. Yad paramahamsyena patadhigamyate.
Yad paramahamsyena patadhigamyate.
Tadarshanahlada pariplutantaro. Hrishyatanu prema bharashrulochana. Nanama padam bhujam asya vishvashrik. Yad paramahamsyena patam dhigatmyate. Tadarshanahlada pariplutantaro. Hrishyatanu prema bharashrulochana. Nanama padam bhujam asya vishvashrik. Yad paramahamsyena patadhigamyate. By that audience of the Lord. Darshana, audience. Ahlad, joy. Paripluta, overwhelmed. Antaraha, within the heart. Hrshyat, in full ecstasy. Tanu, body. Prema bhara, in full transcendental love. Ashru, tears. Lochana, in the eyes. Nanama, bowed down. Pada ambujam, under the lotus feet. Asya, of the Lord. Vishvashrik, the creator of the universe. Yat, which. Paramahamsyena, by the great liberated soul. Pata, the path. Adhigamyate, is followed. So the translation reads, Lord Brahma, thus seeing the personality of Godhead in his fullness, was overwhelmed with joy within his heart. And thus, in full transcendental love and ecstasy, his eyes filled with tears of love. He thus bowed down before the Lord. That is the way of the highest perfection for the living being, the Paramahamsa. So I say, and you please repeat, Lord Brahma, thus seeing the personality of Godhead in his fullness, was overwhelmed with joy within his heart. And thus in full transcendental love and ecstasy, his eyes filled with tears of love. He thus bowed down before the Lord. That is the way of highest perfection for the living being, the Paramahamsa. So here's the purport by Srila Prabhupada. In the beginning of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, it is stated that this great literature is meant for the Paramahamsas. Paramo Nimrat Saranam Satam, that is, the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is meant for persons completely free from malice. In the conditioned life, the malicious life begins from the top, namely bearing malice against the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The personality of God is an established fact in all the revealed scriptures. And in Bhagavad Gita, the personal feature of the Supreme Lord is especially mentioned. So much so that the last portion of the great literature has emphatically stressed that one should surrender unto the personality of Godhead to be saved from the miseries of life. Unfortunately, persons with impious backgrounds do not believe in the personality of Godhead, and everyone wants to become God himself without any qualification. This malicious nature in the conditioned soul continues even up to the stage when a person wants to become one with the Lord. And thus, even the greatest of empiric philosophers speculating on becoming one with the Supreme Lord cannot become Paramahamsas because the malicious mind is there. Therefore, the Paramahamsa stage of life can be attained only by those who are fixed in the practice of Bhakti Yoga. This Bhakti Yoga begins if a person has a firm conviction that simply discharging devotional service to the Lord in full transcendental love can elevate him to the highest perfectional stage of life. Brahmaji believed in this art of Bhakti Yoga. He believed in the instruction of the Lord to execute tapa, and he discharged the function with great penance and thus achieved the great success of seeing the Vaikuntha lokas. And the Lord also, by personal experience. No one can reach the abode of the Supreme Lord by any mechanical means of the mind or machine. But one can reach the abode of the Vaikuntha lokas simply by following the process of Bhakti Yoga, because the Lord can be realized only through Bhakti Yoga process. Lord Brahmaji was actually sitting on his lotus seat, and from there, by executing the practice of Bhakti Yoga in great seriousness, he could see the Vaikuntha lokas with all variegatedness, as well as the Lord in person and his associates. Following in the footsteps of Lord Brahma, any person, even up to this day, can attain the same perfection by following the path of the Paramahamsa, as recommended herein. Lord Chaitanya also approved of this method of self-realization for men in this age. One should first, with all conviction, believe in the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, and without making efforts to realize him by speculative philosophy, one should prefer to hear about him from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and later from the text of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. One should hear such discourses from a person Bhagavatam and not from a professional man or from the karmi, jnani, or yogi. That is the secret of learning the science. One does not need to be in the renounced order of life. He can remain in his present condition of life, but he must search out the association of a bona fide devotee of the Lord and hear from him the transcendental message of the Lord with faith and conviction. That is the path of the Paramahamsa recommended herein. Amongst various holy names of the Lord, he is also called Ajita, or one who can never be conquered by anyone else. Yet he can be conquered by the Paramahamsa path, as practically realized and shown by the great spiritual master, Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma has personally recommended this Paramahamsa Pantha in his own words as follows. Jane parasyam upam udapasya namanta ev. Jane parasyam udapasya namanta evam. Jivanti sanmukaritam bhavidya vartam stane stita shruti gatam tanu vanmano bhir ye paryasho jita jito pyasi tais trilokyan jane parasya mudapasya namanta eva jivanti. Trying to get the Brahma Samhita going here. Jnane prarasya mudapasya namanta eva jivanti sanmukaritam bhavadiya vartam stane stita shruti gatam tanuvan manobhir ye prayaso jita jato pyasitais trilokyam. Lord Brahma said, O my Lord Krishna, a devotee who abandons the path of empiric philosophical speculation, aimed at merging in the existence of the Supreme, and engages himself in hearing your glories and activities from a bona fide sadhu or saint, and who lives an honest life in the occupational engagements of his social life, can conquer your sympathy and mercy, even though you are ajit or unconquerable. This is Bhagavatam 10:14-3. That is the path of the Paramahamsas, which was personally followed by Lord Brahma and later recommended by him for attaining perfect success in life. Tad darshan hlada pari plutantaru hrishyatanu prema parashulochana nanama padam bujam ashavishrik yad paramahamsyena patadigamyate. Lord Brahma, thus seeing the personality of Godhead in his fullness, was overwhelmed with joy within his heart. And thus, in full transcendental love and ecstasy, his eyes filled with tears of love. He thus bowed down before the Lord. That is the way of the highest perfection for the living being, the Paramahamsa. This is the last verse of this section in chapter 9 of Canto 2. So we had the first 3 verses were about not being the body in this chapter 9 of Canto 2. Then from 4 to 18, which is today's verse, we hear about how Brahma is shown the Vaikuntha Lokas by the Supreme Lord. So he performed tapasya and he was given the vision of the spiritual world, which is generally not done. Then tomorrow we'll begin another section from 19 to verse 30, which is where the Supreme Lord is now communicating with Brahma, and he is showing his favor to Lord Brahma. And Brahma begins to ask some questions. That's starting tomorrow, 19 to verse 30. Then from 31 to verses 37 is where we have this whole Chatur Sloka business, where the nutshell verses of Bhagavatam are discussed, which is kind of the gist of the entire Bhagavatam in 4 verses, basically. So that's where that is. That's where the Supreme Lord answers the questions that Lord Brahma gives. So that's from 31 through 37. Then 38 through 46, which is the remaining section of this chapter 9. We have simply the Supreme Lord leaves and Brahma creates the universe. So this is the way it's described in Unveiling His Lotus Feet by Burijan, and I think it's a pretty good breakdown of how this chapter is laid out. So we start off with not the body. We hear about the Lord revealing the Vaikuntha Lokas to Brahma. Then the Supreme Lord describes how he's pleased with Brahma. Brahma asks some questions. Then the Lord answers those questions, and this is kind of the gist of the Bhagavatam section. And then after those questions are answered, then the Supreme Lord leaves, and Brahma creates the universe the way it was before. So that's kind of the overview of the verse. An interesting point that Prabhupada begins right away. I'm going to have to go for some water here. Let me get set up. Right away, Prabhupada launches into describing that Bhagavatam is intended for those without malice. He uses the word malice, and Sanskrit is nirmatsaram. So he is alluding to the very second verse of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Dharma projita kaitavotra paramo nirmatsaranam satam vedyam vastavamatra vastu shivadam tapatrayam mulanam Śrīmad-Bhāgavate mahamuni krite kimva parar ishvara sadvi hridi avarudyate chakriti vishushushuvish takshanat. That last part is really a tongue twister. Yeah, try. It's almost as bad as that other verse, Vashamshi Jirnani Yata Vihaya, where you have the same words almost, but they're in a different order in each verse, and it also is a tongue twister. Dharma projita kaitavotra paramo nirmatsaranam sata vedyam vastavamatra vastu shivadam tapatrayam mulanam Śrīmad-Bhāgavate mahamuni krite kimva parar ishvara sadhya hridi avarudyate takriti vishushushuvish takshanat. Okay, so paramo nirmatsaranam satam. This Bhagavatam is understood by those who are fully pure in heart. And by being fully pure in heart, we're understanding this idea of nirmatsaram, being non-envious. And of course, Prabhupada says that being envious starts with being envious of the Supreme Lord. So we are first envious of God, and then we become envious of all kinds of other people. Because actually, in this world, we are all engaged in our own individual God project. I don't know about you, but mine flopped. But the idea is that we are trying to prove to ourselves we are God, and we want everyone else to think the same thing. And if we get some prestige, we get some money, we get some power, we get some knowledge, we're able to do a little bit of renunciation or whatever opulence we can demonstrate, a couple of peanuts worth of, then we immediately think we have more or less started to succeed in our God project. So when we hear about God, we think, I don't want to think about that, Who is that they think about God? It's interesting to notice that on the internet there have been a lot of atheistic, YouTube videos popping up, God is not great, and things like that. It's interesting that people are making these kind of statements. I haven't had the time to look through them to see what the gist of the presentation is, but probably sometime I'll take a gander to see what they're up on too. But at any rate, the idea is that people want to be God themselves. So some do it by thinking that we, as a collective human society, are all God. If you put us all together, we equal God, which is not supported in the Vedas. And some people think that there is some God, but they hate him. And some people just think that there is no God and he's a mistaken concept. So these various views on the issue. But because there is malice in the heart, this nirmatsaram is not there. Even someone hears Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, it comes in the ear. It doesn't go into the heart. In fact, it doesn't even, just as we say, goes in one ear and out the other. You know, it doesn't really click at all. People can hear the message of Bhagavatam and either they don't even understand what the words mean, or they can scarcely believe what the Bhagavatam is trying to tell. So this is why Bhagavatam is intended for those who are fully pure in heart. And as verse 2 of Bhagavatam says, 1.1.2, as verse 2 says, such knowledge uproots the threefold miseries. If one actually hears about the Supreme Lord, hears the philosophy of the Supreme Lord, hears descriptions of the Supreme Lord, hears the pastimes of the Supreme Lord, all those things purify one, and one gradually becomes near Matsaram. Krishna kirtana gana nartana paro premamritambo nidhi dira dira sanyo priyakaro. So that verse, yeah, near Matsaro pujito. So the 6 Goswamis were near Matsara. They were freed from envy. And I think actually, in our world, religion has a bad name. And I can't say it's not altogether unwarranted, you know, that when you mix religion with envy, you get the kind of thing that people really dislike about religion or really detest about religion. When you are envious of someone or others, then that envy creates those kind of properties that make religion detestable in this world, you know, where people of one religion attack others, either verbally, which is bad enough, or in some cases physically with lethal weapons, you know, because one group of religious adherents find that they are, or have a philosophy, or have some tract of land, or have some book, or some understanding of the book, or some article of philosophy in a particular frame of nuance that they need to impose on everyone else. And if people don't warm up to their particular view or persuasion, then it's time to get out the sabers, you know. So that's the unfortunate thing. And this has earned religion a very black reputation in our world. So this comes from envy. Of course, we understand it as being kanishta adhikari, someone who sees God in the temple, mosque, church, synagogue, but cannot see God in the heart of every living being. So of course, many do not understand that the soul is eternal. So if he doesn't get it right this time around, eventually he will the next time around or some time around. But this is something I think that's important. And if one is unable to appreciate that animals also have life, and they shouldn't be sacrificed just for our particular desire for taste, then one is also envious. He's envious in the sense that wants to get a certain taste and he doesn't care of the suffering that other creatures go through so that a particular flavor can be had. So this is why envy is such a bar to true spiritual knowledge. People are thick as a brick. They just don't get it. You know, no matter what you say or what logic you use, they can't get it until they get a little bit near Matsuram. None of us are perfectly, you know, freed from envy, but we're at least enough freed from envy when we hear genuine spiritual practice and genuine spiritual philosophy. It just rings true. It makes sense, and therefore we take it up. So generally, you know, we find that in the world, what passes as religion is what's described in the Vedas as dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. So we have dharma, which is religious observances, but they're religious rituals that are designed to foster artha, which is material resources. By performing various rituals, we hope to have resources, which is artha. And through that artha, we hope then for kam, which is material desires to be fulfilled. So one performs religious rituals so that one can get various kinds of resources, and then through those resources, one wants to enjoy. The mistake there is that one can be happy by amassing resources and senses, and the sense objects coming together is what equals happiness, which is certainly logical idea, but just doesn't work. At least it doesn't work very much, you know. So at some point, every living being comes to the realization that this just doesn't cut it, you know. And they move on to moksha, where someone goes to the jnani phase, where through speculation and adventures and mysterious religious groups, philosophical groups, various practices, and explores various views of the universe. And through doing that, one's trying to get to what else must be there. If it is true that just simple sense gratification, the senses meeting the sense object, doesn't make us happy, then what does? So one goes on a philosophical adventure. And after a while, one comes to the realization that you can speculate forever, that one can guess this or try that or do whatever else is down the line. But actually, if one just comes to the process of trying to please the Supreme Lord, one does not have to have a perfect understanding of the Supreme Lord. One does not have to have perfect devotion to the Supreme Lord. One does not have to be perfectly unenvious, but at least if one is somewhat unenvious, has some idea of the Supreme Lord, is following a reasonable process of spiritual life with some actual process behind it, not just some guesswork, then one will become like Brahma. One will become transcendental, and the Supreme Lord will be pleased and reveal eventually Vaikuntha, as we learn today, that one cannot force knowledge, nor can one force a vision of the spiritual world. One cannot force a vision of the Supreme Lord. One cannot force some ecstatic level of realization. These things cannot be forced. They come naturally when one is engaged in the simple process of devotional service. Well, you cannot force any of them. You can read, you can speculate, but that won't mean that you will have knowledge. You can travel all over the world, but you'll never see the supreme abode of the Lord. You can try all kinds of mystic processes of yoga or jnana or various other types of rituals and observances and various kinds of occult practices, but they will not actually give you any kind of special realization, any lasting platform that will create the connection that we're actually looking for. So malice, by the way, it means to wish harm to others, to think about it, to engage in it, and to want somehow or other to cause suffering to others, either through neglect or through direct action or from withdrawal of resources or whatever it happens to be. This is the nature of malice, and this is what devotional service gradually purifies from the heart of an individual. It's interesting that this verse that Brahma is quoting here, this verse about Brahma, rather, which is 2.9.18, is in the bottom. Prabhupada quotes another verse, also by Brahma, which is from the 10th canto, 10.14.3. There, Brahma is also speaking, and the lead up there is very similar to what the lead up is here, where it shows Brahma falling like a goldenrod, but the situation is different. In this verse, Brahma has performed austerity. He was in the blackness of space and on his lotus flower, and he didn't know what to do. And now the Supreme Lord has shown him the Vaikuntha worlds. But in the 10th canto, Brahma has just mischievously stolen the cows and the friends of Krishna. And he has realized that he made a big boo-boo. And so he is trying to apologize for his offense. So in both places, Brahma is speaking with the Supreme Lord. In one place, he's speaking with the Supreme Lord as a Lord of Vaikuntha. But in the 10th canto, he meets the Supreme Lord in his original form as Krishna. So that's what's happening there. And this verse is very similar, you know, that one needs to give up these various kinds of speculative ideas. And if we can do that, then we can know what to try to do. And if we continue to try to perform devotional service, we will gain knowledge automatically. If we continue to do devotional service, we will become purified of envy or malice automatically. So if we're not becoming freed from envy or malice, there's something wrong in our practice of spiritual life. It should happen. If we are not becoming free from envy, that means that there's something incorrect either about our philosophy or about our practice. So I want to leave some time for questions, if there are any questions. I have some more things I can say, but go ahead.
On that last point you made, if your practice, you're following the four rites and you're chanting 16 rounds a day, it feels, if you're feeling like you're following it correctly, but you still have those things like envy and malice, distinctly point out exactly what you're doing that's incorrect?
Mm-hmm. Well, basically, we know that what makes devotional service ineffectual is mixing it with offense. We have 10 offenses that are listed in the Padma Puran, blaspheming devotees who've dedicated their lives for propagating the holy name of the Lord, considering names of demigods like Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu, disobeying the orders of the spiritual master, blaspheming Vedic literature in pursuance of the Vedic version, considering the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to the imagination, giving some interpretation on the holy name of the Lord, committing sinful activities on the strength of chanting, considering the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities offered in the Vedas as fruit of activity, karma kanda, instructing a faithless person about the glories of the holy name, or maintaining material attachments even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. So these are the offenses. And in the Harinam Chintamani, it mentions that devotional service can easily get rid of hridaya dorbalyam, which is weakness of heart, which are part of the cloud of anartha. That's hridaya dorbalyam. Or it can get free, we can become free from asat trishna, which is the thirst for material things. But aparad will permanently put the blocks under our tires, and we won't be rolling, So that's why we have to make an effort to look at the 10 offenses. In some temples they recite them every morning. But if you make an effort to look up the 10 offenses and then quiz yourself which ones you're committing, not like that you aren't committing any of them, but which ones you're committing. And then you try to remove those offenses, then you'll start to make much more rapid progress. That's why sometimes people can be around ISKCON or devotional service for many years, and one day they just disappear into nowhere, or one day they drop out, or they do some wild thing. It's because although engaging in devotional service, if at the same time we are making offenses, Krishna usually gives us a lot of rope. We get a lot of leeway. But at some point, he's going to say, okay, I've had enough with this, at that point, usually when people are offensive to other Vaishnavas, that's the easiest and the most general one that happens, that's the one that we're most likely guilty of. So Krishna removes that offending devotee from the society of the other devotees, because he doesn't want them to be, affected in a negative way by that devotee. And the way that Krishna does it is he removes the taste for devotional service from that devotee. And then he thinks, why am I doing this? I've been doing this for all these years, and I'm older, and I got nothing to show for it. I need to go work on my own stuff, So, and these knuckleheads I'm living with, they're just, they think they're advanced. They think they know something. They think they're, doing all these great things, but actually, they're just fooling themselves. I'm going to go out and do what I need to do. So this is how Krishna moves a devotee out through the back door, that loss of taste leads to the sense of wanting to go back into material life. Of course, you know, the fine print is once the devotee goes back out into the material world, it ain't the same anymore. You just can't dumb yourself down again. And, you know, you can try, and it'll work for a while. But at some point, you'll just see that it was you that made the mistake and not everybody else, and you come back to devotional service. But at any rate, that's the thing that slows down devotional service. So the sun is gigantic, and there is no possibility of any cloud being large enough to block the sun. However, we know that the effect of devotional service can be blocked from our perspective with this mist of anartha. And, you know, that's described in the Harinam Chintamani as Hridaya Dorbolyam, Asat Trishna, and what's called aparad. So it's generally, in the process of devotional service, it's easy to burn through Asat Trishna and Hridaya Dorbolyam pretty fast, or weakness of heart and lust for material things. That is pretty easy. But if one clings to aparad, then the brakes really come on at that point. That's what I would say. Yeah. Yes?
On this idea of like sectarianism, but within religion or within, you know, different types of faith, and how it's like very distasteful, and, you know, many times it's just ridiculous. There's a joke actually that Gunagrai Goswami Maharaj was very fond of. He would tell in classes sometimes. That's just short. I just thought I'd read it, because when he first told it, it really helps. Like, wow, this is so silly. You know, there's like such small differences between the conceptions of faith. And when people see it, they're like, this is ridiculous. But it's kind of funny to see. Once I saw this guy on a bridge about to jump. I said, don't do it. He said, nobody loves me. I said, God loves you. Do you believe in God? He said, yes. I said, are you a Christian or a Jew? He said, a Christian. I said, me too. Protestant or Catholic? He said, Protestant. I said, me too. What franchise? He said, Baptist. I said, me too. Northern Baptist or Southern Baptist? He said, Northern Baptist. I said, me too. Northern Conservative Baptist or Northern Liberal Baptist? He said, Northern Conservative Baptist. I said, me too. Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes region or Northern Conservative Baptist Eastern region? He said, Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes region. I said, me too. Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes Region Council of 1879 or Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes Region Council of 1912? He said, Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes Region Council of 1912. I said, die heretic, and I pushed him over. So I thought that like helped show the ridiculousness.
Right, right. Well, as devotees, we have these things too. You know, it's easy to lose sight of these things. We do have a very clearly spelled out philosophy, and so when somebody you know, has a different philosophy or a different take on it, there's a tendency to be very negative with them, and sometimes you know, we mimic these same tendencies that are there. And this is what, you know, is something we have to be constantly on the lookout for. On the one hand, we don't let people just run roughshod over the devotional campus. You know, they come in here and say any kind of thing. But at the same time, we have to recognize that some people will cling to an opinion which is, you know, contrary to actual Vaishnava teachings. And it's their right to cling to opinions that are outside of regular Vaishnava teachings. I think that's one of the things that it takes a while to really come to the stage where you don't feel that you have to prove to everybody that they're wrong, you know. That, people get it or they don't. And if they don't, all right, you know. Vaisheshika always uses the example of the green mango, you know, if you come across a green mango. I mean, unless you're making achar. You don't really have to use a green mango. You wait for it to turn where it gets sweet, you know. So just leave it on the tree. So this is an interesting verse, you know. There's a lot of interesting parts here, you know, that particularly I was struck with Prabhupada's use of the word malice. It's not a word you hear too often, and envy is a word that you hear quite often. But to not envy others means that you don't want to be where they are. You don't want to have what they have. You don't want to be what they are. You're happy being yourself. You're happy with what you have. Others may have less or more, but it doesn't matter. We're each unique, and we're each heading towards Krishna in some way, shape, fashion, or form, soon or much later. And in this way, we can try to have an open, honest heart towards everyone. Not that we will be taken advantage of, not that we walk right in front of a car, but at the same time, we try to be an honest well-wisher of everyone, even those who don't believe the same thing we do, even those who are opposed or even causing specific difficulty for us. I read a book one time that was written by, I think he's a Jewish man, if I remember right. His name is Mark I. Rosen. You know, I don't think he's related to our Satyaraj, who's also, of course, a Rosen. But he wrote a book called Thank You for Being Such a Pain. And the book is about the idea that life is a classroom and difficult people are the teachers. They may not be teaching us what they think they're teaching us, but they're teaching us something, you know. And learning how to appreciate that sometimes we have to deal with people who cause us frustration or anger, or strike us as wasting our time, or strike us as being difficult in some way. This is actually kind of a good litmus test for how near Matsura we are, you know. If we find ourselves easily ruffled by other people, it shows that we've got some distance to go. And, you know, I'm not surprised when I, you know, notice that I have attitudes, and then I think, you know what, that's someplace where I have to work on something. All right, so we're 4 minutes over, and I thank you all for your kind attention. All glories to Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam class. All glories to all the Vaishnava devotees. Hare Krishna.